2025. Of every 10 merchant ships ordered anywhere in the world, 6 were ordered from a Chinese shipyard. 6 out of 10. South Korea took 2, Japan 1, and the United States, the country that in 1943 was launching a cargo vessel every few days, does not appear on the table. That is not an estimate, that is the data. Measured in compensated gross tonnage, Chinese yards contracted 1,421 vessels in 2025, 35.37 million CGT, 63% of the global market. If you ordered a container ship, a bulk carrier, or an oil tanker anywhere on this planet last year, the statistical likelihood is that it was built in China. The scale of this dominance is difficult to overstate. In shipyards across Shanghai, Dalian, and Guangzhou, thousands of workers moved through their shifts, assembling hulls that would carry goods across every ocean on Earth. And if you are wondering how a single country came to control an industry this completely, the answer is simpler than you think. It is not about technology. It is about the one thing almost no one else chose to keep doing. There is a number buried in that 63% that almost nobody is talking about. China's share of global shipbuilding orders was 70% in 2024. It dropped to 63% in 2025. 7 percentage points. That is the first decline in 5 years, and it happened in the exact 12 months that the United States threatened to impose port fees on vessels built in Chinese yards. The timing is not a coincidence. For the first time since China overtook South Korea as the world's largest shipbuilder in 2010, the line went down instead of up, not by much. But in an industry this concentrated, 7 points is not noise. It is a signal. The shift registered immediately in shipping company boardrooms and government offices watching the data. And here is what makes that signal strange. China still delivered 53.69 million deadweight tons of new ships in 2025. That is 56.1% of every vessel that entered service globally. The gap between orders and deliveries tells you something crucial. The ships being delivered now were ordered years ago, when China's dominance was even greater. The backlog stretches forward like a shadow. So how did one country come to build more than half the ships on the planet? The answer is not what most people assume. It is not about inventing a new kind of propulsion or cracking some advanced material science. A container ship is a steel box with an engine. The complexity is not in the design, it is in the execution. And execution at this scale is a problem of infrastructure, logistics, and sustained industrial capacity. If you want to build a container ship, you need a dry dock large enough to hold a structure the length of 4 football fields. You need gantry cranes capable of lifting prefabricated hull sections that weigh hundreds of tons, massive structures that move through space with mechanical precision. You need thousands of certified welders who can work to tolerances measured in millimeters on joints that will hold under saltwater corrosion for 30 years. These workers operate in intense heat, following exacting specifications that tolerate no deviation. And you need all of that running continuously, because a shipyard does not produce one vessel and then shut down. It produces them in series. The moment one hull is floated out into the water, the next one is already being assembled in the same berth, workers moving with practiced rhythm through their familiar positions. Before we go further, tell me something. Where in the world are you watching this from, and what time is it there right now? Drop it in the comments. And if you are new here, hit subscribe. This is where the most important shifts in global power get explained, clearly and without hype. Now, the reason China can produce ships at this rate is not because it built a few massive yards and staffed them efficiently. It is because it built the entire supply chain that feeds those yards. Steel mills within rail distance of the shipyards, operating furnaces that pour molten steel into forms shaped for maritime use, foundries that produce propellers, rudders, and deck equipment as standard catalog items instead of custom orders, parts sitting in inventory, waiting to be installed. Component suppliers who maintain inventory because they know the orders will keep coming, who understand that consistency of demand means lower prices for everyone. A Western shipyard ordering a custom propeller waits months for delivery, watching project timelines slip. A Chinese yard pulls one off the shelf, ready to install. That time gap compounds across every subsystem of a ship. The difference between 18 months to delivery and 36 months is not faster welding, it is logistics, the infrastructure that anticipates need before the need becomes urgent. There is a second advantage that rarely gets mentioned. Shipyards are dual-use infrastructure. The same dry dock that builds a container ship can build a destroyer. The same gantry crane that lifts a hull section for a bulk carrier lifts one for a frigate. The same welders, certified to work on merchant vessels, are certified to work on naval vessels. Their hands moving through identical motions, whether the vessel carries cargo or weapons. China has not separated its civilian shipbuilding capacity from its military shipbuilding capacity. They are the same facilities, the same workers, the same supply chain. The distinction the West maintains does not exist in Chinese yards. In 2025, China launched its third aircraft carrier. It was built at Jiangnan Shipyard in Shanghai, the same yard that builds LNG carriers for export, the same cranes positioning massive sections, the same rivet guns fixing joints, the same precision applied to both. The United States builds aircraft carriers at Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia. That yard builds nothing else. Its workers specialize in a single product. When you maintain a massive civilian shipbuilding industry, you are also maintaining a reserve military shipbuilding capacity that can be activated without building new infrastructure. The West gave that up decades ago, a decision that seemed prudent at the time. So why did the United States and Europe let this happen? The answer is simple. Shipbuilding is low-margin, labor-intensive, and requires massive upfront capital investment in facilities that take decades to pay off. In the 1970s and 1980s, Western economies decided it made more sense to import ships than to build them. Japan and South Korea had lower labor costs. The math seemed obvious. Let them build the ships. We will design them, finance them, and operate them. It made sense in spreadsheets and quarterly reports. That worked fine until it did not. By the time China entered the market in the early 2000s, the West had already hollowed out its shipbuilding base. The expertise was gone, scattered to retirement or other industries. The facilities were closed or repurposed, their cranes sold for scrap. The supply chains had moved, fragmented, relocated to wherever labor was cheapest. Rebuilding a shipyard is not like restarting a car factory. You cannot lease a building and hire workers. You need dry docks, cranes, specialized tools, and a workforce that knows how to use them. People who understand not just how to weld steel, but how to position massive sections in three-dimensional space with millimeter accuracy. That takes years and billions of dollars, an investment no private company wanted to make. And here is where the story takes a turn that most analysts missed. In late 2024, the United States began floating the idea of imposing port fees on ships built in Chinese yards. The proposal was never formally enacted, but the signal was enough. Shipping company executives reviewed the draft documents, calculated the potential costs, and reconsidered their strategies. Ordering decisions that seemed settled reopened. Some orders that would have gone to Chinese yards went to South Korea instead. Others were delayed, held in abeyance while the political situation clarified. The result? China's share dropped from 70% to 63% in a single year. 7 percentage points does not sound like much, but in an industry measured in tens of millions of tons and billions of dollars, it is massive. It is the first time in 5 years that China's shipbuilding market share declined instead of grew. The trajectory changed. What it proves is that dominance in shipbuilding is not locked in by technology or even by cost. It is driven by policy and perception. The moment buyers believed there might be a financial penalty for choosing a Chinese-built ship, behavior changed. Perception reshaped the market. But there is a deeper problem that one policy shift cannot solve. The gap between China and everyone else is not just in market share. It is in the infrastructure that produces that market share. China currently operates roughly 900 active shipbuilding berths, 900 separate locations where ships can be assembled simultaneously, where thousands of workers move through shifts. South Korea has about 100, Japan fewer than 80. The United States has 17 berths capable of building large commercial vessels, and most of those are tied up building Navy ships, their capacity spoken for years in advance. You cannot close that gap in a decade. Building a single large dry dock takes 3 to 5 years. Years of excavation and construction and precision engineering. Training a workforce takes longer. Years of apprenticeships, certifications, accumulated skill. Establishing the supply chain, the steel mills, the component factories, the logistics network, takes even longer, requires reliability across decades. And even if you did all of that, you would still be competing against yards that have been refining their processes for 20 years and can deliver a ship in half the time at 2/3 the cost. The head start compounds. There is one more thing worth understanding. The ships being built in Chinese yards today are not just bulk carriers and container ships. China is now the largest builder of LNG carriers, which are among the most technically complex vessels on the planet. Building an LNG carrier requires managing cryogenic temperatures, cold so intense it challenges metallurgy and engineering at fundamental levels. It requires specialized insulation, exotic materials that insulate liquefied gas, and containment systems that prevent leaks of liquefied gas at -162 degrees Celsius, a temperature that freezes carbon dioxide solid. A decade ago, that technology was controlled by a handful of Western and South Korean firms. Engineers guarded the knowledge jealously. China has now mastered it and undercut the price by 20%. The same pattern is repeating in cruise ships, in offshore wind installation vessels, specialized ships that hold and position the massive turbine foundations, and in specialized Arctic-class icebreakers, vessels that must break through meters of frozen water. The idea that Chinese shipyards are only capable of building simple, low-tech vessels is 5 years out of date, a perception that lags the reality. So what happens next? That is the question every shipping company, every navy, and every government is asking, voices in conference rooms late into the evening. The 7-point drop in 2025 suggests that policy can move the needle, but it also suggests something else. The dominance is not unbreakable. It is maintained by continuous investment, by keeping the yards running, and by holding the supply chain together, by the daily choices of thousands of managers and workers who show up and do their jobs. If orders continue to shift away from Chinese yards, even by small amounts, the entire system begins to adjust. Suppliers start hedging their bets, diversifying customers. Workers move to other industries where paychecks seem more secure. Yards that were built for volume start running below capacity, their vast dry docks emptier than they were designed to be. That has not happened yet, but the fact that it could happen is the first real crack in a position that seemed locked in for a generation. And the West is starting to pay attention, a shift visible in meetings held in Brussels and Washington. In late 2024, the European Union announced a maritime industrial strategy aimed at reviving shipbuilding capacity, a coordinated effort among member states. The plan includes subsidies for domestic yards, financial incentives for shipping companies to order European-built vessels, and investment in workforce training, programs to rebuild the knowledge base. The United States followed with a similar proposal, though it has not yet been funded, still waiting for congressional approval and appropriation. The idea is to rebuild at least some of the capacity that was lost over the past 40 years. But both plans face the same problem: time. Even with aggressive investment, it will take a decade to train the workers. People must be recruited, taught, brought to competency. It will take a decade to build the facilities, to construct dry docks, and install cranes and test systems. It will take time to establish the supply chains, to convince steel mills and component makers to locate near new yards. And in that decade, Chinese yards will continue operating at full capacity, refining their processes, locking in long-term contracts that stretch years forward. The question is not whether the West can rebuild, it is whether it will commit the resources to do so before the gap becomes permanent, before the infrastructure advantage becomes irreversible. There is one more angle to this that almost never gets discussed. Ships last 30 years, decades of service carrying cargo across oceans. The vessels being ordered today will still be sailing in 2055, a quarter century from now. That means the decisions being made now, where to build, who to trust with the technology, which countries control the supply chain, are locking in the structure of global trade for the next 3 decades. The choices made today echo through 2055. If China builds 60 to 70% of the global merchant fleet over the next 10 years, it will control not just the construction, but the maintenance, the spare parts, the upgrades, and the eventual replacement cycle. Chinese companies will become indispensable to the operation of the global fleet. A shipping company that orders a Chinese-built LNG carrier is also committing to Chinese suppliers for components, Chinese yards for dry dock repairs, and Chinese engineers for refits. That dependency does not expire when the ship is delivered. It compounds over the life of the vessel, year after year, service call after service call. The relationship deepens over decades. That is the leverage most people miss when they look at shipbuilding numbers. It is not just about how many ships are built, it is about who holds the repair network, who controls the parts, and who gets called when something breaks. Right now, that network is concentrating in China. And once it is concentrated, it is very difficult to decentralize. Repairing a ship is not like buying a new one. You cannot simply choose a different vendor. A shipping company cannot simply decide to move its maintenance to a different country if the only yard with the right dry dock and the right spare parts is in Shanghai. The infrastructure dictates the decision. Geography and economics align to make the choice inevitable. And that is before you consider naval shipbuilding, which is a separate but related problem. If a country loses its civilian shipbuilding base, it also loses the reserve capacity to build warships at scale in a crisis. The United States learned this during World War II when it converted civilian shipyards to build Liberty ships at a rate of 3 per day. Massive production, coordinated across the country. That was possible because those yards existed and were operational. Today, they do not. The infrastructure that made that possible is gone. So the 7-point drop in China's market share is not just a statistic, it is the first indication that the system can be influenced, that buyers will respond to policy signals, that market share is not permanent, not locked in stone. But influencing the market is not the same as rebuilding capacity. Shifting orders to South Korea does not solve the underlying problem. The West has no large-scale shipbuilding infrastructure left. The capacity simply does not exist. And the infrastructure that does exist, the handful of yards still operating in Europe and the United States, is focused almost entirely on military contracts, their schedules and specifications determined by government procurement. Those yards are not set up to compete in the commercial market. They are not designed for volume. They are designed for complexity and specialization, for building one aircraft carrier perfectly over 5 years. A yard that builds aircraft carriers at a rate of 1 every 5 years cannot pivot to building container ships at a rate of 12 per year. The skill sets overlap, but the business models do not. The economics work in opposite directions. There is one final piece of this that connects everything: time horizons. Chinese shipyards plan in decades. Western companies plan in quarters. A Chinese state-owned shipbuilding company can afford to run at low margins for years because the goal is not short-term profit. It is long-term industrial dominance. They are building infrastructure that will still be relevant in 2050, decades away. They think across centuries. A Western private shipyard cannot operate that way. It needs to show profit every quarter, or the investors leave. Financial markets demand results measured in months. That fundamental difference in time horizon is what allowed China to outlast everyone else. They were willing to take losses in the 2000s to establish market position. They were willing to invest in facilities that would not pay off for 15 years. Western competitors could not match that patience. The pressure for immediate returns was relentless. And now that the infrastructure is in place, the advantage compounds. Lower costs because of volume. Faster delivery because the parts are in stock. Better integration because the same company owns the steel mill, the component factory, and the shipyard. The pieces fit together seamlessly. So where does this leave the rest of the world? The truth is uncomfortable. There is no quick fix. Rebuilding shipbuilding capacity at scale would require sustained investment over a decade, money flowing consistently, without pause. It would require political will to accept low returns during the ramp-up period, acceptance that profits will not materialize for years. And it would require a willingness to coordinate industrial policy in a way that Western democracies have not done since World War II. Government, business, and labor working in alignment. It would also require accepting that some industries are not purely market-driven. Shipbuilding is strategic infrastructure. It underpins global trade, naval power, and industrial capacity. The goods that arrive in every port, the military vessels that project power, the supply chains that sustain economies, all depend on shipbuilding capacity. Treating it as just another commodity to be outsourced was a miscalculation. But recognizing the problem and fixing it are two different things, and right now the gap is widening faster than anyone is closing it. The momentum favors China. The 7-point drop in 2025 proves the system is not locked. But it does not prove that the West is rebuilding. It proves that policy can shift orders. That is not the same thing. There is one more angle worth considering. What happens if the policy signals intensify? What if the United States and Europe move beyond proposals and actually enact port fees, tariffs, or other restrictions on Chinese-built ships? The immediate effect would be a further drop in orders. South Korea and Japan would benefit, receiving orders that would have gone elsewhere. But the second-order effect is more interesting. If China loses access to Western markets, or if access becomes expensive enough to offset the cost advantage, Chinese yards would need to find new customers. And the most obvious new market is the Belt and Road countries. Infrastructure projects in Africa, Asia, and Latin America that are already being financed by Chinese loans. Countries developing ports, expanding shipping networks, building the infrastructure of growth. A shipping company in Kenya or Pakistan ordering a vessel does not care where it was built. They care about price and delivery time. And Chinese yards would still have both advantages in those markets. The cost differential remains. The result? China could lose market share in the West and simultaneously increase dominance in the rest of the world. Which raises a question nobody seems to be asking. Is splitting the global shipbuilding market into competing blocks really a solution, or just a new problem? Would it be progress, or merely displacement? Here is what we know for certain. China builds 6 of every 10 ships ordered globally. That position was built over 20 years through sustained investment, vertical integration that connected every link in the supply chain, and a willingness to accept low margins during the build-up phase. In 2025, for the first time in 5 years, that share declined from 70% to 63%. It happened in the same 12 months that the United States threatened policy action. The decline proves the system is not locked, but it also proves that shifting orders is not the same as rebuilding capacity. The West has no large-scale commercial shipbuilding infrastructure left, and rebuilding it would take a decade of sustained investment. The yards exist only in memory. Meanwhile, the ships being built today will sail for 30 years. The decisions being made now are locking in dependencies on parts, on repairs, on upgrades that will shape global trade until 2055. That is not speculation. That is how ships work. The advantage China holds is not technological. It is structural. They built the yards, the cranes, the supply chains, and the workforce, while everyone else was deciding it was not worth the effort. And now that infrastructure is running at scale. Lower costs because of volume. Each ship costs less when you are building them continuously. Faster delivery because the parts are in stock, waiting on shelves. Better integration because the same company owns the steel mill, the component factory, and the shipyard. The parts flow directly from production to assembly. Reversing that advantage is not impossible, but it requires committing to industrial policy on a scale that Western governments have avoided for 40 years. It requires accepting low returns for a decade, money invested with no immediate profit. It requires coordination between private companies, governments, and unions in a way that has not happened since the 1940s, a level of alignment that modern democracies rarely achieve. The question is whether the political will exists to do that. And right now, the answer is unclear. No one is mobilizing. What is clear is that the 63% market share is not the ceiling. It is a snapshot of a system in motion. And the direction of that motion, whether it consolidates or fragments, will be decided by choices made in the next few years, not by the ships already in the water. The invisible thread running through all of this is time. Ships last 30 years. Shipyards take a decade to build. Workforces take longer to train. Supply chains require continuous orders to stay intact, to not break apart. Every decision made today compounds over decades. A ship ordered in 2025 will still be carrying cargo in 2055. The yard that builds it will service it for its entire life. Dry docks and repairs and modifications. The parts supplier will provide components for 30 years, their business built on a single customer. That is why this is not just about market share. It is about who controls the infrastructure that shapes the next generation of global trade. It is about power, embedded in steel and logistics. And right now, that infrastructure is concentrating in one country faster than the rest of the world is responding. The momentum is clear. The 7-point drop in 2025 is a signal, not a reversal, a signal that the system can be influenced. But signals do not build shipyards, investment does. And the investment required is measured in decades, not quarters. If you found this useful, let me know in the comments. This is where the most important shifts in global power happen, quietly, while nobody is paying attention. I will see you in the next one.